Welcome back to another episode of The Frustrated CEO. I'm one of your hosts, Patrick Lyons. I'm here with two of my esteemed colleagues and friends and cohorts in crime. First, Patsy Freeman. Patsy, welcome to you.
Thanks. Delighted to be here.
It's going to be a good one. And our colleague, our other co-host, Leb Tannenbaum. Leb, I'm going to toss it to you to introduce our guest and kick us off.
Oh, thank you, Patrick. I am so excited to introduce Dan Denison, Dr. Dan Denison. Dan is the chairman of Denison Consulting. Their mission is to boost the performance of organizations by improving their corporate culture and leadership. Dan taught for 22 years at IMD. Correct me if I'm wrong, if I say it wrong, Dan, at Lausanne, Switzerland. Close enough. Yeah. Prior to this, he was an associate professor at the University of Michigan, at the Ross Business School of Business for 12 years. Mm-hmm. He holds a master's of sociology from Kent State University. And in my experience, Dan is a global thought leader in the field of organizational culture and its link to performance. He is a friend. He is a leader in his own right. He is a mean guitar player. And welcome to the Frustrated CEO, Dan Denison.
Wow. Thank you, Webb. Thank you, Patsy and Patrick. Great to be with you. Really enjoy following your podcast. Lots of good insights, and really pleased to be a part of it today. And I guess I never really thought of myself as a frustrated CEO before, but that one does resonate. So glad to contribute to that theme and to talk about any of the issues that we have in common and that you think would be most interesting to your audience. That's what it's all about.
So I have a historical question. It's actually, we've known each other for, I don't know, a couple of decades. And I've never really asked you this question, but when did your interest in this link between culture and performance turn into something that, one might call a lifelong mission? What's the story?
That's great. Thank you, Webb. This does take me back. But, I studied psychology and sociology, social psychology, all of that stuff, undergraduate, master's degree, PhD, University of Michigan. I started thinking about, what's my next step? And I wanted to learn more about business. I wanted to work with organizations. So I got into an organizational psychology program at the University of Michigan. Great program, great people, really a cornerstone of my career. But, I was like taking all these classes. And so one day, there was this seminar that was on org theory or something or other, but the topic for the week was organizational effectiveness. And I thought, oh, wow. I came from a business family, and I was really interested in, in all of this. And naively, as you are, this is when I'm 28 years old or something like this. And I thought that they were going to say, here's some research. It's University of Michigan, for God's sake, world famous in this area. Here's some facts, here's some data about effective organizations. And boy, I mean, I went home kind of disappointed that day, because it was all about, different stakeholders have different criteria and blah, 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 and, what is effectiveness? And it's like, come on. I mean, is there any evidence in this field that the theories that we're studying every day, every week, every class, supposed to learn them all, do they have any impact on the performance of businesses? And I was, God bless the University of Michigan, go blue and all that good stuff. But, I'm sort of left there with, hey, I could do better in this. And I was really fortunate. I worked at the Institute for Social Research. and founded by Rensis Likert, famous management theorist, and basically the guy that invented, modern survey research. So I worked on a project that had data from gazillions of organizations, never had made much sense of it. And so I thought, well, geez, maybe I can piece together this, sample of firms where I can actually say, well, are these more profitable? Do they grow? And, it was interesting because I didn't get much encouragement. It's like they kind of look, you're out of your mind. I mean, there's a lot of noise. I mean, one guy that I revere and love, and one of a handful of people where I got to know them pretty well, as they were like major luminaries in the field. Ed Lawler. Took one of my first organizational behavior classes from Ed Lawler. And he said, he says, there's just so much noise in all of this survey data, and just garbage in, garbage out, give up, kid, and find something that's going to work. And so, that I don't want to give you the idea that like I have a contrarian streak in me or anything, but but that kind of like said, okay. So that's when I started looking at what was possible. I had a good friend and colleague, Jerry Ross. His grandfather or whatever was the Ross in Touche Ross, the audit firm, the forerunner of Deloitte. So he taught me, finance and, all of the ways that you could look at the performance of a firm. And so, I pieced together this sample of, 35 companies where it had survey data and then performance data over time. And much to, everyone's surprise, it actually made some sense. And you found that companies that had high involvement cultures. This was before empowerment and before engagement. People talked about involvement, which was a much more structural concept and a little bit less psychological. And I think there's some good insights in that difference that you hear today in the contrast between what's culture and what's engagement. Culture is about the system. But they were more than 2.5 times more profitable in the high involvement organizations, and they were growing. And furthermore, the data, the variance, what became the concept of consistency in our model, was the variance in scores across an organization. And that was fascinating too, because actually you found that the organizations that had the highest consistency in their survey data were the highest performers, but not for long. Okay. So consistency was a good, tactic for let's get our team mobilized and aligned to deliver today. But actually it flipped the other way around in an interesting kind of way that said, no, if you want to innovate and grow for the future, you better have variety and differences and, sources of innovation, dissent, friction, learning. And so that kind of got me, off and running. And that's been, one of the main themes in my research and my practice, and got drawn into the practical side of it because, people were interested in that research. They wanted to hear more. What's it mean when you apply that? And so that's what eventually led to kind of creating our own model and set of measures that were the foundation for creating the firm. And I often joke that the best way to look at my career is I'm like one of those, academics that committed the cardinal sin of doing something useful. And it's been hell to pay ever since, I mean, and it's kind of a halfway house career between, academic, serious, scholarly. I can trot out my Google Scholar sites, with the best of them. But I kind of outgrew that and really trying to understand how the ideas could have a positive impact on organizations. It's what driven my career. So I guess we got time for one more question now.
Okay, Dan,
Patrick's going to do the editing, so it'll be good. Don't worry.
No, I do have a question. I was thinking about this. You've already alluded to how the language of culture has changed over the years, right? You said one example, it used to be involvement.
Mm-hmm.
Now it's empowerment, engagement. I just think even 10 years ago in my own career, right? So I've been working with companies and culture and strategy. Even just 10 years ago, I feel like there were still conversations I had to have with executives where I would try to explain the importance or the value of culture.
Yeah.
When you started this, think about from when you started to now, do you almost feel validated? Like, I've been saying for years and years and years, this is important. And now it seems like it's everywhere, right? Now it almost, if there's an executive who doesn't understand the value of culture, they're the rarity versus it seemed like 10 years ago, the rarity was the one who really got it. How have you seen that changed over the years?
Yeah, for sure. Because I've had a bunch of those, conversations too, and they do change over the years. And that's, in a lot of ways that is validating, but the challenges get to be so much broader that it's never really felt like, gee, isn't this a good time to kind of sit back and rest on my laurels with this? Because what happens next has always been, most interesting to me. One of the things I was forced to do while at IMD was to do a case study on the Ferrari Formula One team. Somebody had to do it. So, I drew the short straw. It was really amazing. And one of the best things that I came across was an interview of Enzo Ferrari, the founder. And the interviewer says, well, Mr. Ferrari, he says, what's your favorite car? And he says, the next one. And it was true. He had no use for last year's race cars. They'd bury cars in the backyards to get them out of the sight. And so, there's always new challenges. One of the challenges that's, that you see more and more prominent in the last, 5 or 10 years is it's a mainstream concept. So the people that came out of the woodwork or that, rang me up, 10, 15 years ago, they had a, pretty intense interest, and they were early adopters, they got it. One of the things that happens when you mainstream is, people come at you with a checklist and say, well, here's 37 things that you need to provide here so that we can engineer this. And what are the levers that we start pulling to steer and, mobilize this? And, so there's a lot of clients that come at us with a, less than a full understanding of the complexity. And, one of my, favorite Dilbert cartoons is one where the CHRO is sitting in front of the, the CEO, and the CEO pounds the table and says, we need a new culture by Monday. And I wish we could do that. If some of the other frustrated CEOs they've solved that problem and now they're frustrated over something else, give me a call, because I'd love to know how you do that quickly, because the culture evolves. It's a very deeply human thing. It's more akin to how do you change the dynamics of a family. or of a community than it is like a simple set of levers to pull. And so with the mainstreaming, the expectation that all the I's are dotted and the T's are crossed, and this is a scripted, straightforward implementation process, is very prevalent today.
Yep.
And that one's pretty challenging, because on one hand, like, they got it, they want to move, they action, impact, but there's a lot of complex choices to make, and it takes some perseverance. You have to stick with it.
Yeah.
That's brilliant.
So Dan, we're talking about leaders, right now. We're talking about what it was like maybe to work with a leader 10 or 15 years ago. And, here we are today. We're going through the second year of a pandemic, right?
Third.
Third.
Yes.
We're just coming into the third. But hey, don't worry. I mean, as Zeke Emanuel, Ram's brother, who's on the medical school faculty at the University of Pennsylvania, reminded us early on in the pandemic, don't worry, because after all, the bubonic plague only lasted for 300 years.
So now we've lost everyone.
That's reassuring. Yes,
talking about
exactly.
frustration. Yeah, well, but we're surviving. We're surviving,
Yeah.
and we'll come back to that, because what we've seen during the pandemic.
If leaders, I've heard you say this, that leaders, it's proven with your research team, with data, that leaders have the greatest impact on an organization's culture. Right. And I know beliefs have a lot to do with what drives behavior and drives a leader's behavior. So in the beginning, when we first recognized that, with at least the CEOs that I was working with, I was surprised that the call to action for me as a consultant, with more of an outside perspective, was to help them rewrite these really crazy COVID communications that were wrapped with fear and demanding accountability if you're going to work from home, and super afraid, so belief that we're going to lose it all because we're not physically together.
Yeah.
Right. So, anything, you want to riff off of what you're seeing, because you are around a lot of research, a lot of data, but, in my experience, I was like, no, that fear-based communication is not what people want or need right now. And it's going to all the work you've done, maybe all the good work you've done on the culture. Can it, maybe one of the questions is, can it be wiped out in a moment? Can it be wiped out by some of the mistakes that CEOs make in their personal life or their social media life?
Right. There's a comet coming at us right now. Don't look up. I mean,
I actually watched that movie.
I did too. I thought it was about COVID till almost the end. And it's about a lot of things. But quite right. It's a challenging time and scary, because it is an existential threat to lots of different kinds of organizations. And we did a bunch of research on this. We have, if you're interested, we can give you links to this, to a webinar series that we did. First of all, we did a bunch of COVID resilience,
right,
pro bono. April, Friday, March 13th, 2020. We were in a town hall meeting in our former offices. And we kind of said, geez, should we be here? And later that afternoon, we decided, no, we shouldn't be here. We should go home. Our people should go home. We can work well from there. In the first week or two, oh my God, what are we going to do? What are we going to do? What are we going to do? After 2 or 3 weeks, people said, well, what do we need an office for? We can, work this way fine. And, then we started thinking, well, April 2020, like, what are we going to do? Real crisis all around. And one of the things we said was we can offer to help all of our client organizations by trying to help them understand how the people are reacting to this. And we published a bunch of things on that. And the most interesting part about that is that their culture scores, where we'd worked with them before, ended up being a really good predictor of how they took this. So the ones that had a strong culture to begin with, they weren't talking about, like, how do you manage by fear and how do you monitor, people working from home. They were saying things like, Sheetz is a retailer gas station chain thing, Eastern Mid-Atlantic, Pennsylvania-based company, family company, great organization. They said, well, we've actually been putting deposits into the culture bank in Sheetz. There's a great presentation on this by Stephanie D'Oliveira, their CHRO, that was a part of our forum last year. It's on our website. And, she talked about creating that culture bank and that you can draw on in hard times. You can draw from, but you also have to keep contributing to it. And so the responses were very closely linked to the culture they had going into the pandemic. So if you've got sort of a fear and compliance culture before the pandemic, that's hard. You're starting on your back foot. But, we've been surprised. We're just publishing some stuff now where we're looking at the pandemic era data. And actually, much to many people's surprise, overall culture scores have not declined. And in some places, they've even gone higher. Backs against the wall, it's amazing what we can accomplish. One area that does appear, though, to decline has been core values. There's a compromise there, and that's where the backs against the wall part of it has maybe, had some cost. Some industries, like retail, like healthcare, the stress is enormous. The risk is enormous. But on average, we've been surprised because, and maybe it's also that people that come to us, to do work in this area during a pandemic are the ones that are pretty committed to this to begin with. But we thought we'd see things fall off the cliff, but they haven't. Now, that doesn't mean there aren't a whole host of new challenges, for sure. Absolutely. And we can get into that. But where you started the journey you were already on has really had a lot of impact on how companies have reacted through the pandemic.
Two things came up for me, but go ahead, Patrick, jump in.
I was going to say, how do you maintain your culture and or your core values when suddenly everybody's in their own isolated office, their own home office, and you don't see? I think that was one of the beliefs. Let's talk about beliefs. One of the beliefs that leaders had was, I can no longer influence or control the culture because I don't see these people every day. What are you seeing is working? What are you seeing is not working?
Well, yeah, I mean, it's a big challenge, and there's no question. And the need to connect is constant. That hasn't gone away. How you connect is different. And leaders need to create the expectation. for their teams, the leaders in their organization, that now more than ever, it's your responsibility to find a way to connect with your people. For some people, that's, get out there, get your mask, get your shots, be with them, because that's where they are. And, organizations where the CEOs, holed up in this lake house while everybody else is out there, fighting on the front line, that's not a good dynamic. That's one that, some executives are just are chronically aware of that and doing everything they can to mobilize their team to find a way to connect in this environment. It varies a lot by industry. It varies a ton by age. I've had lots of CEOs that were conspicuously, close in age to me or Lib that just wanted to get back to normal. And it's hey, brother, I hear you, but we ain't going back,
Right.
This is, a step into the future. And actually worked with, we did a bunch of, we're doing kind of on-site client work, with many organizations now. And last summer, I did a bunch of that kind of work, but it was interesting because most of it was extremely compromised. Most of it became not back to work. It became hybrid. And I don't know about you, but given a choice of a face-to-face meeting, a virtual meeting, or a hybrid meeting, man, 1, 2, 3, that's my preference order in there, because hybrid is way more complex than either of the other ones.
Yes.
And how do you maintain a dynamic relationship, both with people on the screen and people in the room? I remember doing one session where I'm sitting here at a big conference table in a big conference room, same as it ever was. The CEO is at the end of the table that away. So, going like this. Screen, is behind me. Screen with the guy that heads up retail, where, it's just been a really, really difficult, is over here going, oh my God, this is really, and so you're kind of going, and you got to look at my screen too, because there's people, and that that's a skill, and it gets better with practice.
Mm-hmm.
But hey, that's the new world. If you're still looking around for a dial phone, it's it's time to accept that reality's here, and it's 2022 now, and it's kind of fun, actually. Mark Sokol's the guy, is an editor, consultant, colleague, a friend for years, based in Minneapolis. Early on says, we're talking, and he says, well, along with social distancing comes distant socializing. It's distant social. Ooh, I said, Mark, that's nice. Because you can connect with anybody, any place in the world, morning, noon, or night. And that's an incredible gift. And, I think it's just important to keep reinventing yourself and your organizations as you go through this, because actually, if I can learn something, if our organization can learn something new every day, every week, and there's lots of opportunities. This is an opportunity-rich environment for learning new stuff, like never before.
Exactly.
So kind of get on the merry-go-round and, start whooping it up a little bit. Because building that connection and that energy is extremely important. How about onboarding 2.0? What are you doing with all the people? We had we had a holiday party that we actually kind of squeezed in just in a like just sort of before Omicron got like too far out of control, and we had 4 people that had worked with us for a year then that we'd never met, and so we flew them in and had a great time, but understanding how do you reach out to the people that have a pretty tenuous connection. And I think there's a lot of techniques for doing that. We've got to use face-to-face in a thoughtful way. It's not just people that are saying you got to be back in your office at 8:30 on Monday so you can do your Zoom calls from there. Commute, risk. We've got to innovate with what we've got, but that connecting with people is what it's all about. And don't want to forget that at the same time that we're all saying, gee, how are we supposed to build culture and connect with our people? Social media world has evolved to where, you can do nothing but watch, TV and read about people that have been radicalized through social media.
Okay.
And so, we can get them to kind of shoot each other and, acts of destruction, but we can't get them to finish the sales budget, for 2022. And, I think there's a profound irony here that the tools to motivate and integrate and create a bond are more widespread and more intense and even more all-encompassing than they've ever been before. But it's kind of hard for us to figure out just how to marshal them as a corporation to pursue a business goal. But we'll get it. A lot of places are getting it.
So Dan, another thought comes up, and you've seen more companies, and all the people that work with Denison Consulting. I don't know that work has ever been to some degree more personal, because a person is in their home,
Right.
And some organizations are like, oh, how cool. The cat just walked over their shoulder.
Yeah, exactly.
One shoulder to the other. And now I know a little bit more about you than I ever was going to know in the office.
Yeah.
And then others are saying, no, wait a minute, you have to dress in a particular way and you have to turn on your computer at a particular time. And, whether you have a 2-year-old or a cat or a dog or whatever the case may be. And it's got to have an impact on 2.0, the organization's culture. And just, wondering, what you're seeing. Are you seeing a differentiation in the large organizations versus the smaller, which are more nimble? Because we are, and we're not offering a standard. We're asking questions that might alleviate or even, inform some thinking that will actually work.
Yeah. We had one of the webinars that we had this fall was with a friend of mine from London Business School, a guy named Julian Birkinshaw, really accomplished kind of strategy, teacher, author, thought leader. And he'd done some research on this and wrote an article, I think it's in the Sloan Management Review out of MIT, that was called The Blinkered Boss. And how, we've sort of closed in those horizons there. And if we can just focus all our attention on the task, then everything will be fine. My 28-year-old son that does sort of, data crunching software development at a research firm in New York says, well, Dad, you don't understand, like for us introverts, we've been waiting our whole lives for this moment. And it's potent. Give me one of these meetings where everybody needs to check in on the red, yellow, green lights on each of their, Zoom is like just fabulous. Because you don't have to have like, an hour of socializing before and after and, positioning and all that. You can just kind of do your work and then, move on with it. And so Julian's work was, and this is in one of the webinars too. It's on our website. I'm glad to share it. Was it on task stuff? People are doing fine. And yeah, there's some adjustment. There's some challenges with long-term, strategic, creative, innovative, high-end conflict, buy-in. Yeah, that's all those are challenging or more difficult. Straight ahead task stuff. Do you waste less than waste? That's a loaded term. Do you, allocate more time to kind of chit-chatting before and after in a web meeting or in person meeting? No question. Yeah, people do a little chit-chatting at the beginning and connect, and we learn how to do that because it is often the main way that we connect. But the task part of it works fine. The bond, the creative, the buy-in part of it, sometimes it hardly works at all. Hey, as long as everybody's still on the screen, I've got a 2-inch by 3-inch tile of you, so Patrick's in. And I think that we all had many years of understanding the quote unquote real world that we can still build upon. And I don't, this isn't going to go on forever. But and I haven't yet seen there's got to be a great sci-fi, dystopia about what's the world like when we're all essentially on our own version of the Truman Show, interacting with people we've never met, to do an organizational role. And I think we're a few years out from that. But, I also think that this, I like history, it does repeat itself. And so I went back and tried to look at, what disruption was created when Alexander Graham Bell invented the telephone. Oh my God, how are we? It's going to be so superficial. We're not going to meet in person. And very similar dialogue, but we survived the phone, really pretty well. And we found that actually as a boon. And I think it's the same thing, grab it and go. But that can be hard to remember day to day when we're just trying to, get our work done and move things forward. But, it's very commonplace. How many people before the pandemic worked in the same office with their boss? Mm-hmm. Well,
Some, yep.
Some, yes, it's not unheard of.
Right.
And it's a positive thing. And even when they're there, and we all know the joke about, if you see my boss, find out, his or her name, so I can call him. This is not like, everything was tightly integrated and we were all one and together until this horrible pandemic thing came around, and now it's all fragmented. It's an evolution. And actually, I think the remarkable part is how much innovation there is, and how much there is to learn. Some people struggle with that, but some are off and running.
Yep.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Patsy, you had a question.
Well, to Dan's point, that off and running, that spread is probably greater than it ever has been before.
Yeah.
Between those people that are, fear-based and frozen to those people that are off and running and innovating. The need for employees, much less top talent, has never been greater.
Right.
And as the workforce gets younger, and is looking for more purpose, we see over and over again that a lot of, especially top talent, are making decisions about
Oh
who
yeah.
they're going to work with based on culture.
Mhm.
And
Yes.
I'm wondering if you could speak to that a little bit. I mean, even above salary and everything else, people are choosing where to work because of culture.
Well, it's kind of the ultimate magnet for recruiting people. Culture, most often should include a strong sense of purpose. Are people motivated by that?
Mhm.
You bet. I mean, are people leaving retail jobs that they really loved before the pandemic, because they've changed their mind? Or are there just a lot of other alternatives now that are safer, are more flexible? And, I think that organizations as employers, they have to compete based on their flexibility and their ability to accommodate all kinds of talent, all kinds of style. There are people that like to work from the office. We downsized, dramatically, about as quickly as we could, and now have a small office because there's really 3 people out of our 35 that like to work from the office, and they're local, and that's cool. I go in there once in a while, not much, once or twice a month, because it takes 15 minutes. It takes a half an hour to go over there and back. And hey, I could do another Zoom call. I could do 6 more emails. But you've got to be able to accommodate that variety and do so with a level of ambition, that this is the way it's going to work, and we've got to invent this. And I think the learning curve is pretty impressive that lots of organizations have had. And if you don't have that flexibility, through the fall, I was really kind of scratching my head about how many more CHRO discussions there were that were about, well, is it 2 days versus 3 days, or 3 days versus 2 days, versus what are the activities that are much more powerful in person, and that you need to build around, and also that they tended to ignore this big split between the office workers and the front line, and healthcare, retail, teaching, education, very hard. So how do you connect and keep those 2 parts of the organization connected so that they're doing the same thing? And also the geography of opportunities changed dramatically. None of these people that we hired, well, one of them that we hired early on actually was local. The other 4, we're all over the country. And that's the way it's gonna be.
Mhm.
And so, we can rise to that challenge. But thinking a little further down the road and thinking about how do you protect and grow that fabric? How do you make contributions to your own culture bank so that you've got a strength and integrity that you can rely on? Because the Zoom world's like the best ever for coordinating things that are all over the world. It's just not that great for building the relationships. And we found a really interesting thing when we brought people together is you'd go have dinner, and usually with a group of new employees, you go out to dinner, you have a drink or 2 and you're talking. They're going to want to talk about work and what's the future. And maybe just because we've we're doing the task like so well. It's like maybe we should get to know each other. And so that was fascinating because I kind of checked around, and maybe we just hired the wrong guys, because we hired people that just wanted to bond. I'm joking. It's a terrific bunch of hires. Because you can search for the whole country, the whole world. But we mostly got to know each other and didn't actually. At the end of one of the dinners, I said, well, guys, I don't want you to think that don't want to talk about work or that it's not important. It is. I'm really glad that we just had a nice evening to get to know each other. And I hope that just makes it that much easier for us to dive into any of the business issues you got. And here's my number. Ring me up, give me a call. But that and I was just on a call, earlier today with somebody that was talking about how, the people go into the bond. And like she said, well, geez, I'm even wondering if we should have an agenda for these get-togethers because nobody follows it. They want to get to know their colleagues.
Dan, I have a question, kind of a current event question, and then ask how culture factors into it. So recent news, I'm a gamer. I grew up a gamer.
Oh, all right.
One of my favorite game makers is Blizzard. Kind of my dream job would be to work with the folks at Blizzard someday.
What's your favorite Blizzard game?
Oh, honestly, all of them. I am a World of Warcraft player. I also love Diablo. That whole series is super fun. So they've been they were acquired by Activision a number of years ago, right?
Yeah.
Activision Blizzard. And just the other day was announced that Microsoft is announced their intention to purchase Activision Blizzard for $70 billion.
Yeah, right.
Talk about cultures coming together and what are things that you've seen, because you hear the statistics that so many acquisitions or mergers fail. Is it because of culture or is it other things? I mean, it's not a universal answer, but what do you got?
No, it's interesting. I mean, my oldest daughter that works for Apple is a gamer. And I've always wondered how, with billions that go into games, why is it that we have NBA Jam, but we don't have MBA Jam, where essentially you're doing a networked online game where you're running organizations together, and that's your learning platform.
Yeah.
Maybe some of that 70 billion, but obviously the world's a big game. I don't want to be the one to break it to you, but in the sense that parts of it can be modeled. And I think that we may look back and chuckle at this strange affinity that people had for the analog world back in the 2020s, because the virtualized world has a whole lot of potential. Some of my favorite executive programs ever have been ones where we took the time and the investment to basically model the corporation with a little 25, 30 variables system dynamics model, and then build a simulation around that, because especially in an organization where nobody ever ran a P&L before, because it was a one P&L organization, this was tremendous value.
Yeah.
Don't keep those parts of your life that separate, because I think they're converging and it's a good thing. But your question was about mergers, acquisitions, and let me say something ridiculous here, in contrast to the other ridiculous things I've been saying. I think that the whole thing of a tech platform is what people are acquiring will change some of these merger dynamics. And I think you already see that even in our own field. And so, I think that there are, we've learned some things about acquisition, about integration. That said, I mean, some of them are oil and water, and it has a lot to do with how, if you can create a team that's really going to collaborate.
Mhm.
When IBM Consulting acquired PwC, a piece of their consulting business, years ago, worked with them a bit, and two of the guys that were in charge of the integration, stood up at a meeting, an integration meeting, and said, "We have so much in common that it's like we're twins that were separated at birth." And it's like, I mean, wonderful companies, and it didn't turn out, it turned out pretty well, but the optimism and the naive approach to that, because sorry, PwC is not a shop where every consulting hour is evaluated in terms of how much hardware you can sell.
Hmm.
And IBM, for good reason, is
Right.
part of their business model. But I think that you have to put the work into integration. I mean, in a lot of ways, Charles O'Reilly, guy at Stanford, now Berkeley for years, wrote a paper years ago with the title that says it all, which is "The acquisition of technology is the acquisition of people." And it was about Cisco. And, Cisco made deals with newly acquired companies. John Chambers, quoted widely as making deals where he says all decisions, all people decisions stemming from this merger will be made jointly by the two CEOs forever. And you go, really, forever? Now that's a long time. But that was their approach to it. And, don't acquire somebody if you don't see their team as one of the biggest assets.
Right.
But, then again, the multiples on tech platforms are what's driving the M&A business now. And I think we'll continue to do so.
Yeah. Thank you.
Don't you have any easy questions?
Not today.
Or ones with short answers? I can give short answers. Yes, no, 37, Wednesday.
Well, you had mentioned a few minutes ago about onboarding 2.0,
Mm-hmm.
and we have several clients that have added 30 or 40, 50% to their workforce
Yes, right,
in the last 2 years.
Oh,
And
yeah.
some people are working and have never met other people
right.
except in this format.
Got a
So-
client right now that has grown from 37 to 270 people, or still a pretty small firm, over the last 3-4 years. And most of the people, 2/3, have come since the pandemic.
Yeah.
But I'm sorry, I interrupted you.
No, just so I mean, onboarding for many can be a challenge to begin with, because you
Right.
can just, it's kind of talk about plug and play earlier. You have a warm body, you're going to plug it into a seat. It's especially more complex and important perhaps in this pandemic time. Talk to us a little bit about culture and onboarding people.
Probably best to assume it never ends. Because our ability to do things that are unique and specific from a training point of view, that's task. We could probably still do that pretty well. And there's so much innovation and kind of online learning. That's, that's a plus. But, it's still true that people join organizations and they quit bosses. And that's, that means that you've got to go back to the boss is the hub, and how does each one of them kind of manage their own flock, their own teams, and how do they keep building that? I think that you see a lot of, in some ways, the whole world is just like governance is a big stack of Zoom invitations these days. And one thing that I notice is that there's a lot of half-hour meetings. Now, maybe that's just because I talk too long and I go on and on and on and people are trying to squeeze me out there. But I think you can get a discipline of getting a hell of a lot of work done on a task level, and sometimes you can connect too with half-hour meetings. And I do half-hour meetings with most, and sometimes all of our team members every month. Now, it's not a big organization, and if you got 30,000 people, that's a little bit tough. But that's on a leader's checklist, is to connect, and understanding where leaders are disconnected. And one part of it is certainly, same as it used to be. I mean, did you follow through and do what you said you were going to do last week when we talked? Right. And that's pretty fundamental. But the leader's also an interesting hub for the network that actually gets things done. And so if a leader creates a hierarchical hub and spoke thing where now the 9 people with which I did check-ins all need to check back in with me and the accountability, much less dynamic than how much interaction do they create among those 9 people and among their 9 people and your 9 people and your 9 people and your 9 people, because the change from a control hierarchy to a network, means that you're checking in on the trade routes, the coordination patterns, the flow. And there's always a tension between a control hierarchy and a value chain and network. And I think connecting, one of the biggest things that we've seen in our organization, we've gotten less siloed during the pandemic. And one of the, not without a lot of effort, but one of the things that most excites new people is sort of learning the network, is learning the enterprise. There's more, it's hard to tell what, caused what, but there's more attention and excitement among our team about the regular networks. Just in a discussion yesterday with somebody that said, well, when I talk to this person, they always copy their boss, and I'm just trying to get the 2 peers to interact. And then we said, okay, well, that's a little bit of a vestige here of the past. Create that network, and that's a sticky part. So, I think what are you onboarding people to? A job? Well, not exactly. A network, a purpose, a team, a set of stakeholders. I think that has a richness that, at least, I hope, creates a stronger bond between our people and their colleagues.
Got it.
Hmm.
Yep.
Dan, I have,
Thanks.
we're maybe coming closer to the end. I have a question that will ultimately take us to, or where I want you to go with it, is to some new modules and surveys that you've added.
Yeah.
Okay. And, one of the things that really we've talked about and we've noticed is that organizations can do a lot of great work. Maybe you have a recent, very great full color culture survey.
Right.
And external pressure comes in and flies in like a problem.
Right.
And, I'll give two quick examples. One was an organization that we worked with for 5 years. Things were really in good shape. And then the 2016 election occurred. And people found out that people that they were closely working with were on different sides of that election. And it really caused some problems. Another was, we were in an all company meeting and the topic of safety came up. And the topic of safety led to, people leaving later at night, and there's no lights. But where
Yeah.
it went to ultimately was about guns.
Right.
And then a whole other thing, completely outside of onboarding and strategy and execution and all the good work, all the connection, and things just blew up again.
Wow.
I'm trying to tie that back to, so you have a DEI module, you have some new survey information that is intended to help ultimately with the culture of the organization.
Well, I will go there, since that's where you're trying to, herd me here. But that's so provocative. I don't know. I'm surprised at Leb here asking something provocative like that. I've never heard that from him before.
At the end, right?
But the story I got to tell you is that my oldest daughter lives in Austin, Texas, and she's a transgender woman. She was my son, I think is the proper way to say that, for the first 26 years, and for the last 10 years, she had been my daughter. And she and her partner, who's also a transgender woman, are there's a common. They live in Texas, right? And her ability to navigate Texas is just like, astounds me. It's fantastic. But they have guns, and part of this, there's a protection piece of it too. But that was part of my experience. Is I go down to visit, and what do we want to do on Sunday afternoon? And her partner Cassidy says, well, we could go to the range. And it's like, ooh, okay. And so and now we've done this 2 or 3 times. It's a regular thing. It's fun. But that's been my learning experience, is going to a range in Texas with 2 transgender women. And it was fun. It was no big deal at all. And I never really would have anticipated that would be one of my learnings from the pandemic, but here we are. One of the things that we have done in our practice is responded to issues and concerns, whether it's engagement or commitment or trust or safety or innovation or sustainability, digitalization, diversity, equity, inclusion. All of these things are areas where we've developed benchmark measures of these that we use with different clients to help target the specific issues. And all of those have been kind of client driven.
Right.
And there's also this common thread. I got most clear about this through digitalization, sustainability, and DEI, where the people that really are effective at leading those changes say, well, yeah, this is a culture change. Sustainability is a very different mindset. I mean, DEI, are you going to do compliance, representation stats? That's the core? Or is it a different mindset for how we view our colleagues, how we view the world? Chuck Barber from the Navy did a fantastic presentation with us at our forum last year, where he talked about this, where those are culture change. Safety is a big culture change issue. And so, one of the things that we're doing, in addition to, like, here's another module, you can ask these 12 items or these 6 items, whatever, it's that this is an important component of your culture that maybe needs some attention. And, it comes down to mindset, leadership, the systems that we create. And if you don't try to change all 3 of those at the same time, you might have some different metrics that you track, but you're not really going to change the organization in a lasting way.
Right. Thank you. Yeah, that's, I think, important for our listeners to hear and recognize. Yeah, you may, even if it takes you by surprise, there's a place to go where there's a survey, there's some research, there's some data to help you make the changes. And it is about culture. It isn't just about headlines or whatever has happened in your organization. And we need to be prepared for it. So thank you. You hit the nail on the head, Dan.
That's great. Well, I feel like we could go another whole hour.
I'm sorry I don't give more like short, crisp. I can.
I think,
but you have to ask short, crisp questions.
Dan, your punishment is you'll just have to come on another time in the future to cover all the other things that we didn't get to. So
I'd be glad to. This was a lot of fun. Thanks. Yeah. I learned a lot from this, and I hope that your followers enjoy that. And if there's any way that any of the resources that I've referred to are of interest to them, we'll make sure you can find them.
Yeah, you bet.
On our website. So
I will ask you that at the end. I'll make sure that we get your book, the webinar series you've talked about, where people can learn about the Denison culture model. Before we do that, let's get practical. So this is the part of every episode where we the request, the ask of our listener is, don't just listen and think, oh, that was interesting. Do something, right? If nothing changes, nothing changes. So Dan, when you think about what our listener, what a CEO, a senior leadership team could potentially start doing tomorrow, either it's a mindset shift or a more practical application of a to-do list, a checklist, what are some key takeaways, key things that a listener can do to begin making inroads, either to improve the culture, to improve performance? What comes to mind for you?
Well, in the leadership position, your first order of business is always direction and strategy. And wow, I mean, how do you predict? I mean, I can't even figure out, like, when can I book a time to go skiing with my kids or go to the beach or whatever? I mean, you can't plan anything a month ahead of time these days. Nonetheless, that's what you inherit in that role, is what, given all of the uncertainties of this, are the key elements of the strategy, and what are the implications for everybody in the business, top to bottom. That's nothing new. Everybody that's a CEO, frustrated or not, is in the job because they've been damn good at that for years. But I think I've been in a lot of meetings where, essentially people are saying, well, we kind of hit pause on really that strategic thing. All the issues are still there, but since we haven't been able to get together for a year, we've just been kind of doing take a step back, take a deep breath, and where are you in terms of mobilizing your team to deliver on what you see and your board and your leadership team see as the most attractive opportunities in your industry? Never more important. People are doing spectacular things.
Mm-hmm.
We're not sitting still. It is not slowed down. Boy, use that pause button with enormous caution. You're probably more likely to use the fast forward button. I think the second part of that is to understand that the market doesn't pay much return to unimplemented strategies.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, they're terrific for all us consultants and professors and all that kind of stuff. But it's the strategy you implement, not the one you aspire to. And that means that you've made a connection with everybody, top to bottom, so that you mobilize the whole team in pursuit of that. And, we used to think in terms of 3 to 5 years, 10 years, long term, whatever. Now we are in an environment where 3 to 5 minutes, maybe 3 to 5 days, 3 to 5 months. Hey, this is getting serious. If you have a journey of 1,000 miles begins with a single step,
Mm-hmm.
and you telegraph, morning, noon, and night with every step you take. Friend of mine is buddies with the famous primatologist Jane Goodall. And so, they're talking, one day, having a drink, and he's talking about one of his clients. And Jane says, well, Anthony said, don't you know they're behaving exactly like baboons? And then they laugh, and they said, well, what do you mean? And Jane had an extraordinarily specific thing that she said, well, there's two things you remember. One is that in baboon tribes, the senior members don't do any productive work themselves. They simply decide the future of others. Okay? And every member of the tribe makes eye contact with the alpha male an average of every 20 seconds.
Wow.
Okay? So obviously we've evolved far, far, beyond, and certainly don't want to imply that any of your leadership team are behaving like baboons. But, we, over the holidays, I read a bunch of pre-history. The Dawn of Everything is one of my favorite books now. And really, it talked about how, things have changed a lot in the last 20, 30,000 years, and even Leb and I don't have that long a perspective on it. But physically and intellectually, how much have we changed? We're very, very tribal creatures. And, you've got to connect, and finding a way to be human, empathy, and compassion. I'm sure there are gazillion online courses in how to project empathy over Zoom.
Mm-hmm.
And, we joke, but essentially that's a big part of what we have to do, because that's one of the most powerful impacts you can make as a leader, is to connect with everybody, top to bottom, and express a sense of purpose that binds them to the organization and to you, so that you can deliver. Because boy, oh boy, the CEOs that have great strategic ideas that they don't implement don't last long.
Right.
It's how we mobilize the team to implement that really drives the value.
That's great.
So I'll stop there for now.
That's beautiful.
I hope we get the chance to continue, because it's always fun and really interesting the way that you've positioned this for frustrated CEOs, because there is a lot of frustration, and
tough.
the job is never done, and the possibilities of it are just endless.
Mhm.
So imagining that future and leading people to it, that's one of the most human things that we can do to get people mobilized.
That's awesome.
It is awesome.
Thank you, Dan. Patsy, what do you have?
I have, which we didn't explore, so maybe for next time. Culture is about the system.
Yeah.
It is complex, always evolving, and deeply human.
Yep.
Yeah.
Those last two pieces, evolving and deeply human, are easy to forget.
Yeah, they sure are.
I also have that onboarding never stops.
Yeah. That's right.
So start it, never stop it, right? So
Yeah.
I see a lot of companies that don't even start it.
Yeah.
The other is, I mean, I could just say connection.
Yes.
So, you know, especially in this hybrid environment, especially on Zoom, the need for connection, while it's how we connect is changing, the need for connection has never been more important.
That's right.
So
That's good.
those are some of mine.
Lev,
That's
you want to
great.
go?
Sure. One of the things that resonated for me was that the geography of hiring has changed and probably forever.
Yes.
And that is, to me, let's get practical about that. Let's recognize that that's reality now, that we're in an opportunity-rich environment.
Right.
Because, the other side of that is we talk about the chaos, we talk about the challenge, we talk about those types of things. And yet we are in a very rich environment for opportunity. And some people are really grabbing onto that. Two more, and I'll turn it back to you, Patrick. One is that purpose and culture is the ultimate magnet for attracting new talent, and especially young new talent. But I
Right.
think in general, that's a great, let's get practical. So that means if you hit the pause button and you're a leader and you're listening to this and you're saying, where are we with our purpose right now? Are we on purpose? Do we pay attention to the culture and give it what it's due? And then the other one I'll mention is that Dan, you said something about consistency helps us in the beginning, but
Yes.
change and innovation and conflict all help us grow.
That's right.
So,
Well, wow. As usual, I'm a hapless victim to Leb's provocation once again. and short, just let me make two comments. One of the things on the CEO practical to-do list is think about the future from an organization design point of view.
okay.
The where do you hire people? Where do they come from? Where do they go? How do people interact? Organizations are really like kind of, at least at an office level, are becoming like conference centers with a bunch of action learning teams where you come together for a purpose and then you go back. And I've yet to see examples of here's how we design the hybrid organization of the future. A lot of discussion, and it's very specific to each person's organization.
Yeah.
And so take that one on board, because a few guiding principles are there, and listen to your millennial middle managers. Okay.
Yeah.
3M, just like the Post-its, they have enough experience that they understand what it takes to lead and to manage. But they're also pretty, digitally native in this. And, I mean, listening to, colleagues in the 50s, 60s, yeah, that's good. Lots of legacy, lots of, learning, blah, blah, blah. But the people that are going to create the world now are the sort of whatever 33-year-olds that have, few years of management experience and a whole life to live. They're the ones that are going to invent the future. So those are the people that we want to get in touch with and listen to.
Amen. Thank you. I've got a couple to add based on what we talked about today. One, Dan, you said earlier, changing culture is more like changing the dynamics of a family than it is a bunch of levers that you pull to make quick changes. And I just thought, boy, when you frame it that way, you understand the work involved, right?
Yeah.
So I thought that was a great insight for a listener.
Yeah. And on a leadership team, like a family, you don't always have all the options you might like.
Right. Well, it's true. Right? I don't have the authority to fire my peers. I have to figure out how do I work and integrate with these people that the company. I mean, I can always leave, but if I want to stay here, then I have to figure out how do I work with these people that the company has put to my left and to my right.
That's right.
So you're right. Yeah. It's changing those dynamics. There is no quick fix. I also like this analogy. To think of your culture like a bank account that you can make withdrawals from, but you also have to be making deposits into if you want to have a positive balance. I thought that was really cool. And then this one, because this is so relevant, it's all relevant. You've been fantastic. This one is relevant. So many CEOs who are trying to figure out how do we construct the hybrid model. And I thought you said it succinctly and beautifully. You said build your hybrid work models around the activities that are better done in person, not how often you think someone should be at the office.
That's
Amen,
good.
brother.
I thought that, well, I'm glad you like it. It was yours.
Well, and one of the, how do you do that as an executive? I mean, I think you have to accept how fundamentally impossible, but absolutely necessary that is, because it has to happen on a local level. And if you say, well, our policy is flexibility, it's like, oh boy, that's not good enough. But if you don't allow flexibility at a local level, but one person's flexibility and agility is another person's chaos.
Mm-hmm.
And I think we need to accept that, stay close to the ground, listen, be empathetic, because who knows what the cadence is for the product development team.
That's right.
You gotta, and it's funny. I mean, you trust them enough to accept that they actually only have one job and they work for you now, rather than doing 2 or 3 on Zoom mornings and afternoons. Haven't heard those cases yet, but mark my words, we will. But you don't have the choice not to trust your leadership on the front line. Not easy, but you don't have the choice not to trust them, because the dynamics of monitoring them have changed at a minimum.
That's also going to go on the Let's Get Practical.
Let's get practical. That's always good. It's always good.
That's it. All right. Is there anything else anyone wants to add for the good of the cause? Have we?
I'm good.
You're good.
This is 3 days of fun and music, and 3 days of only fun. This was
Dan,
great. Thank you.
Let's make sure we are checking all the boxes. How can someone find your? Now you've got a few books, correct?
Yeah.
Okay. Where can someone find your books? Where can they order them?
If you just go to our website, denisonconsulting.com,
Okay.
denisonculture.com takes you the same place. John Wiley, Josie Bass published the book. It's on Amazon. Hey, send me a email and I'll send you a signed copy. And always glad to hear from people. But there's a catch that, if I send you a signed copy, then you have to read it. If you just want to put it on your shelf, buy 100 of them. And Amazon will do good for that. But all that's on our website. no problem to find me through our website or through Leb. Leb knows all the vitals, cell phone, email, all that good stuff.
Are you comfortable giving out your email here, or should
Yeah,
someone?
sure.
Yeah.
Sure. ddenison@denisonculture.com.
And that's Denison with one N.
Dennis, I'm a 1N Denison. This is a critical piece of it. And my cell phone is 734-272-2711.
Excellent.
And texts are always good. And I'd be delighted to hear from any of your listeners and get any of their thoughts and be there the next time when they're the ones doing the presentation.
And the webinar series that you mentioned a few times, where can I find that?
It's all over our website.
Okay.
And there are all of those are, like yours, those are all the past ones are captured there. Also from our forum. We'll have a 2-day forum in May, again this year, virtually. And that's all clients talking about the work that we've done with them. I try to stay away from, giving this lecture or that, consultants giving the pitch, hearing from the people that really do it, really make it happen. That's what we always try to do for our May forum. So, hope that's on the website, and we hope you can join us then.
Great. Excellent. Dan, thank you. I feel like we should automatically schedule you for the next one because, as I said, such great information, and an hour plus flew by, almost an hour and a half flew by.
Amazing.
And there's so much we didn't even get to. So thank you for that. Thank you for your wisdom. It truly is an honor for us to have you here. Thank you for that.
Thank you, Patrick,
Yes.
and good luck with the editing job here. This will be fun.
And I will thank my partners in crime, Patsy Freeman, Lev Tannenbaum, as always. This is one of my most favorite things to do, and the fact that I get to do it with the two of you is just makes it that much better. So thank you for
Patrick.
Thanks,
Terrific.
Patrick.
Thanks,
All right.
guys.
Thanks,
Listener, thanks for
Everybody
tuning
be
in.
well.
Thank you for the
Thank you, Dan.
All right.
Sorry, Dan. You froze everything. Thank you for tuning into The Frustrated CEO. You can download our Let's Get Practical from the website, thefrustratedceo.com. And this episode and all previous episodes are in all the podcast libraries. So make sure you download, listen, like, share, and leave us a review. Let us know what you like and what you'd like us to do better. Thanks so much, and we will see you again on The Frustrated CEO.